where does all that money come from? What is the size of the total video business writ large? And then where does it all go? How does it get dispersed along the value chain after it comes in the door?
Hi, everyone. For today's episode of A Guy with a Scarf, I'm happy to have with me Doug Shapiro. Hi, Doug.
Hey, Carlo, how are you? Or should I call you Guy with a Scarf?
To be honest, I basically stalked you online because I read can I call it a long-form masterclass article on anything streaming and media or media and streaming, and I was fascinated. So I thought, okay, I need to talk to this guy. So you want to tell me, a bit about you, how your journey to where you are now?
Sure. I'll try to give you the short version. So I've been in and around the media business my whole career, almost 30 years now. I was an analyst for about 14 years on Wall Street, covering up and down the media value chain. So, a lot of cable, satellite, the big media companies. And then I spent 12 years at Time Warner. And the first 6 of the years of those, I ran investor relations. So that was going from one side of the house to the other, one side of the table to the other. And then I had a couple of strategy roles. And my last role was running corporate strategy, data strategy, and research at Turner, which was at the time, the largest division of Time Warner. And since then, I've done a bunch of things. I took 1 year, which is really just a sabbatical year of taking online courses and fun stuff like that, which we could or probably won't talk about. And I spent about 18 months with on a failed SPAC. So that was educational, if not particularly fun.
When was that? Sorry, when was that? Because SPAC is something that I've started to learn as a term, recently, kind
of. So that was probably from the beginning of 21 through the end of 22.
Oh.
Yeah. It's relatively recently. That's a whole other story. Anyway, since then and during that, I've also been writing and I've been advising a couple of companies. So I do some independent advising. I'm also a senior advisor for Boston Consulting Group. And as it says under my name there, I write a Substack called The Mediator, which focuses largely on, I would say, longer term structural issues in media.
Absolutely. And so let's start with this monstrous, in a good sense, article, because I often, reflect or I speak on stage or I talk to people, or I do these kind of things. And some of the things you said are popping up here and there, but it's possibly one of the few places where I've seen all of it together with some depth.
Yeah. So I assume you're referring to this most recent piece I put out called "Video Follow the Money," right? Is that what you mean?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was an attempt to look at the video value chain in the United States on a holistic basis, and that's and when I say video, I mean quite broadly. So it's traditional pay TV, broadcast, streaming. Which it obviously includes all AVOD, SVOD, FAST, CTV, all that stuff, as well as theatrical, box office, whatever, and home entertainment. So the idea being to look at the total. Well, I did two things. One, I tried to do a waterfall buildup to see where does all that money come from? What is the size of the total video business writ large, and then where does it all go? How does it get dispersed along the value chain after it comes in the door?
So can we follow the money? Can you guide me through your view of, where the money flows? And at the end, it seems there's not a lot remaining, but you tell me. So.
Yeah, I think as you said, it's it was meant to be a comprehensive piece. So there's a lot of different angles on it. And as a matter of fact, I'm in the process of exploring some other ones for a follow-up. But there are a couple of takeaways. One is that the traditional business is probably a lot larger than people realize. So if you index all the money to a dollar, about 66 cents of every dollar that comes in the door. And when I say comes in the door, I mean from consumers and from advertisers. 66 cents is from the traditional television business, so traditional pay TV and broadcast. For all the talk about streaming and NCTV, enfast, and Netflix and Roku and all that, it's only about 21 cents. And box office, you could argue, maybe gets too much mind share. It's only 4 cents of every dollar. So that was one kind of interesting thing to look at. Another thing that I thought was interesting was that video really has not has been quite stable on a nominal basis for a long time. And so what you can see is that streaming is growing. So streaming, and one thing I should add is what I also included in this total is YouTube in the United States. So YouTube advertising.
YouTube all, not just YouTube TV, YouTube complete.
Yeah, so YouTube TV is in there as a distributor and a collector of pay TV revenues, but also YouTube advertising. I didn't include TikTok and Reels, and that's another debate. But the rationale for including YouTube but not including those others is that so much of viewership of YouTube these days is now on television. It's increasingly attracting the same kinds of advertisers. So it's really, is really of short form video. It's the most kind of TV like, right?
I agree.
Which is something we can also talk about. But anyway, so what was interesting is that the narrative, I think the very clear and consensus narrative is that streaming is the future and traditional is the past. What's interesting is that all of the growth of streaming is coming at the expense of all those other forms of video, right? At the expense of broadcast and pay TV and theatrical and home entertainment. And so as a result, the total pie really is not growing. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Another interesting cut at the data is that the consumer spend and the advertiser spend have also been quite fixed. So not only is total video has it not grown on a nominal basis, but each of those components really hasn't grown either. And so what that means is that consumers are shifting their spend from traditional to streaming, and advertisers are shifting their budgets, their video budgets, from traditional to FAST and AVOD and NCTV, but that both of those are relatively fixed, which I think is not necessarily an intuitive conclusion. I don't think most consumers have a spreadsheet where they're doing a calculation, but the way it's kind of working out is that they're really swapping those dollars out pretty much one for one. And then a last implication that follows from that one is that both consumer spend and advertiser spend are losing ground on a real basis, meaning that consumer video spend is declining as a proportion of personal consumption expenditures, PCE, and advertiser video spend is declining as a percentage of total ad budgets. So anyway,
sorry, do you know where? So is the money going somewhere else, or they're just spending less?
They're spending less. So if we're talking about advertisers, they're spending less on video. Most of that is all going to digital, right? It's all going online.
Okay. Which also includes social, etc., right?
Well, yeah, it includes social, search.
Okay.
I guess there's still some display in there, but yes, it's. But yeah, I think that's the bulk of where it's going to.
Yeah.
So anyway, and then the question is, once that dollar comes in the door, where does it go? And there were a few interesting conclusions there. About 23 cents comes off the top to distributors. So pay TV distributors, movie theaters, ad agencies, all the people who take the money in the door. It's about 23 cents. They only keep about a cent of that as operating profit. So being in the video distribution business is not very lucrative. And then, so 77 cents ends up in the hands of the media companies. That's what gets remitted to them after the distributors take their cut. And of that, about 50 cents goes to content.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a lot. And of that 50 cents.
Can I stop you there just to be specific?
Sure.
When you say that 23%, as we're talking about the whole, so in theory, am I right assuming that when we talk about streaming, there is no distribution? True or not?
Not entirely true, because in streaming, you have a combination of, I think most of people think of it as a direct to consumer product. And so for the component that's direct to consumer, then yes, nothing comes out in that 23 cents. But there are, there's a lot of streaming services that are still sold through third parties, through Amazon channels or through Roku. So yeah, so of the 77 cents or percent, either way, 50 cents of that goes to content, and about 40 cents of that goes to entertainment content, and about 10 cents of it goes to sports content, which is, largely sports rights. Yeah. And then the media companies end up keeping about 12 cents in operating profit at the end of the day. So it's about maybe a 15%, 12 of the 77 cents would be about a 15% operating margin.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, it was, I think if you step back, it was interesting to me. I've been following this business, forever, at least forever from my perspective. And there were still things that jumped out at me that were not obvious.
And obviously I come from sports. So what is the specific of sports? I think on one hand, it's a bit different between US and Europe, but in the US, it seems sports matter a lot, especially in this moment where everything is bundling, rebundling. They still understand what is really keeping, the customer in. What's your view on sport, live sports, etc.?
Yeah, well, one of the sections of this piece was talking about why I think we're not in a sports bubble. So lately, there's been, I think it's pretty logical to look at the pressure on the traditional television providers and say, well, they're going to be squeezed. They're not going to be able to afford sports rights anymore. But I think when you look at that disparity between entertainment spend and sports spend, then it shows why there's probably not a bubble, and why a lot of that, why there's room for that 40 cents or, significant portions of that 40 cents to be reallocated to sports. Mm-hmm. Because what's happening right now is sports is outperforming on viewership. It's outperforming on monetization, meaning, that the monetization per hour of consumption is higher. Also, I think when you look out a little bit further at the impact of generative AI, it's more likely to reduce the production costs of entertainment than it is of sports, clearly. And it also is more likely to commoditize the value of entertainment content relative, and therefore increase the relative value of sports. So I think there's, as I said, it's certainly logical to conclude that the pressures in the ecosystem are going to ultimately affect the licensors' ability to pay for sports. But because of that massive number that's still spent on entertainment content, I think that there's a pretty big cushion for some time. The pithy answer is there's kind of like sports and everything else, and then within sports there's NFL and everything else.
Yeah, true. Even I think with Turner, you took a lot of care of NBA with Turner Interactive at least until some time ago, right?
Yeah, no, Turner still has NBA rights today, and actually, that's actually a hot topic in the news because
yes,
and there's a big question whether Warner Brothers Discovery is going to retain those rights or not in the next contract.
So one thing in this whole ecosystem and description and analysis, how do you see the role of the big tech guys, Google, Meta, Apple, Amazon?
Well, the numbers that I walk through, they reflect some of what they do, right? There's the way the numbers fall out. I don't include any contribution from Amazon as an example because under the presumption, which could be wrong, that most people get Amazon Prime through their Prime subscription and they're not paying a discrete fee. I think the broader topic or the broader issue for the big tech platforms. Yes, they clearly are playing a role. I think that what's very interesting is that they are all obviously multi-product, multi-line businesses, and they are able to use video to cross-subsidize something else, right? So if you're Apple, you're most interested in locking people into your device ecosystem. If you're Amazon, you might know that people who watch more video buy more toothpaste or shoelaces or whatever. And so because of that, they're able to run or willing to run video at much lower margins. Nobody really, at least I don't know what the actual profitability is of those businesses within Amazon or within Apple, but they have a very different profit motive than standalone media companies. So I think,
Sorry, it can be kind of a, not legally, but an unfair advantage compared to pure media companies.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd call it an unfair advantage. I would just say that if you're in a business to make money and someone enters your business who doesn't need to make money, it's not usually.
Yeah. And you think this will push the big media company to do something more? Like, so small case in sport, DAZN starting to, do a deal with Fanatics, trying to include betting. So trying to go a bit beyond the revenue stream connected purely to video and to other, obviously adjacent revenue streams.
Yeah. Well, if Disney already does that, right? Disney has very large experiential, whatever, events, live experiences, parks, obviously, and they're doubling down on their capital expenditures in parks over the next whatever. I think they've talked about a $60 billion number of capital going to the parks. So they are also a multi-product business in that sense. NBCU to a lesser degree. Well, Comcast is as well because of their distribution assets, and even within NBC Universal, they have parks too. I think if you're a standalone media company, it's going to be difficult. I think it's going to be very challenging. As you know, Paramount is in the middle of sale discussions. I think there are, some real questions about whether Warner Brothers Discovery will be a standalone company in a few years. So yeah, I think it's going to be, I think it's being very challenging to be a standalone entertainment company.
So all of this has been quite a very complex matter, but fascinating. You said before, because I didn't forget that you're thinking of a follow-up article. Why? What do you think you still need to analyze?
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of things. One is just looking at a longer time series of the data to understand when the inflection points were. So, for instance, I was just looking at it, and I could see that, as I mentioned, so consumer spend has been declining as a proportion of PCE, personal consumption expenditures, over the last several years. And video ad spend has been declining as a proportion of total ad budgets. both of those things really started to happen around 2015. So we're going on almost a decade now that video has been losing ground relative to other expenditures, right? So that's one angle. I think it's also interesting. Well, the angle I'm looking at now, which I haven't finished, is trying to take a harder look at sports and sports rights and where sports rights are going, and the ability of the ecosystem to absorb those rights increases.
That's so let's get back maybe in 6 months to see where you are and where the market are. Thank you, Doug.
Sure. Thank you, Carlo.